Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Deliverance from Lowen Games. Deliverance is a 1 to 4 player cooperative skirmish game with both single shot and campaign game modes in which players are going to be taking control of angels as they slowly take down all these demons over here, eventually facing off against a prince to take him down as well. That's very high level skirmish game. You're going to have powers and abilities, you're going to fight stuff, you're going to take actions, they'll take actions, you'll try to kill them, they'll try to kill you, whoever left standing wins the game. That's it. With that, we can go ahead and go to the review. Or we can go into a drop more detail and then the review. So, the drop more detail part. The general idea of the game is you're going to go ahead and set this up by going ahead and pulling out different battle cards over here, setting up the game board, and then setting up different figures on the game board based on the battle cards that you draw. It's worth noting at this point, we're currently using the acrylic standees for both the angels and the various enemies. The base game is going to have miniatures for the angels as well as cardboard standees, and I happen to like the standees enough that I prefer them over the miniatures in this, which is why you see Christine and Uriel over here on the table in full pristine color. But to that end, you're going to go ahead, set up the board based on the various enemies. You're also going to set up various saints as well. These saints on the board, they're going to start possessed over here, and they're going to be, well, making your game harder until you go ahead and rescue them. Although when you do rescue them, you will gain XP. That's the upside of that. To that end, what you're going to go ahead and do is on your turn, the angels are going to take actions. You're going to have different actions marked over here, and the angels can go ahead and take their actions, and you're going to alternate the angels taking actions and the demons taking actions until everyone has taken an action to end the round. So you're going to pick an angel over here, they'll go ahead and take an action, and they can take 2 actions on their turn. You're going to look at their abilities over here, they're going to have a bunch of abilities. You almost always have a general movement ability over here that also has the opportunity to use it for free once per turn. The way these abilities over here work is there's going to be certain icons telling you how you have to spend your action on them. Are they reactionary? Are they free abilities? Are they free currently once per round? And you're going to go ahead and utilize those to move around the board, close the distance to the enemies, and then smack them with all the goodness of your variety of powers over here that will hopefully do as much damage to them as possible. So for example, let's take Uriel over here. Uriel might go ahead and use a Scorch action, which currently has a move 3 spaces, then deal 1 damage to an adjacent demon. So let's go ahead and move this guy over here. Let's have him start over here. You can have him start in any area of this starting power board over here. And to that end, we're going to go ahead and have him go 1, 2, 3, where he's going to go ahead and deal 1 damage to this cruel archer over here. From there, we'll go ahead and activate Firebrand over here. Firebrand's going to give him another courage over here. Courage is a currency that your abilities will give you and you'll spend. And we're going to go ahead and deal that much damage equal to that stat. The way abilities work is they'll often reference your core attributes over here, and we'll do 2 damage to each adjacent demon. So right about now, we would deal 2 damage to each archer because he's adjacent to each archer. That's going to be a sample turn. You've gone ahead, you've moved, you've done your ability for Firebrand, but the way the move ability works right now is the first time you take the move ability, it's a free action. The second time, it's a non-free action, which means we've taken a free action and a standard action, which means we can actually go ahead and activate Firebrand again, which is actually going to be very helpful for powering up Crucible to smack down those enemies. If you know what Crucible does, this will make more sense for you. If not, well, maybe you'll see next turn. From there, once an angel has gone, they've resolved their full turn, the enemies will go ahead and activate. You're going to look at the cards over here, and now the cruel archers are currently going to activate. You're going to look at their board, and they have a general activation they're going to perform. Over here, each cruel archer deals 1 damage to the nearest angel in range. This damage cannot be prevented by shield. So basically, the archers are going to shoot us right now, which seems reasonable. They are archers after all. After that, you're going to roll a die and do an action for each archer the same as whatever action you rolled. So for example, we roll this 1 over here, which means both archers are going to perform a rib cage quiver. Range 4, move 2, they engage the nearest angel and deal 2 damage, then deal 1 damage to itself. So the way enemies activate is they're going to do a default action, and then they're going to roll a die, and each of the archers is going to perform that action as well. So you have a bit of a, they're setting you up for smackdowns. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to hurt you as you go through it. Once the enemies have activated, you'll go ahead and activate the next angel, going back and forth, activating angels and enemies until everyone is activated and you end the round. When you end the round, you're going to go ahead and add up all your experience. You'll gain experience for every single time you move next to a saint over here. They're going to become a rescued saint. It's a drop more complicated than that, but the basic idea is when you go next to saints, you'll rescue them. You'll gain experience. Whenever you kill enemies, you'll gain experience listed on the player board. And whenever you have experience equal to the party level +1, you're going to go ahead and lower to 0, or just subtract that amount of XP, and everyone's going to gain an ability. The way the abilities work in the game is players are going to have their own talents. Each angel has their unique set of talents for levels 1, 2, and 3. So for example, Uriel over here has this talent deck over here with all these level 1 talents, and you can go ahead and select any 2 of these, not looking at them. You can select two random talents, and then look at them and pick one. That would be one of the ways you can level up. We have Cleansing Fire over here. Once during your turn, you can test 7. Testing basically just means rolling dice, and you can pass on a 7+ over there. On a success, choose 1, remove an affliction from yourself, or heal 1 damage from yourself. So you can set up a free action of Cleansing Fire where you can constantly go ahead and heal or remove afflictions, or you can set up Blistering Rush. Whenever you use Scorch, you may move 1 additional space. So your Scorch ability is going to be significantly faster, and it's going to deal 1 damage to each demon instead of just 1 damage to 1 target. So that's going to be the way the talents work. You pick 2 talents from your deck, either 1, 2, or 3, and then you pick one of those and put them into play. Or, and you always have the choice over here, or you can get Heavenly Treasure. So, if you get Heavenly Treasure over here, for example, we'll go ahead and draw 2 of these, take a look at what they are, and we have these 2 over here, which are different abilities. And for example, let's pretend we take Speaker's Scroll over here and discard this one. First of all, whenever you use a prey action, you can reveal 2 cards, draw 1, and discard the other. So your prey actions, which is a standard action that all angels have, will give you more flexibility on the abilities you get from it, because we've talked about the talents, we're talking about the Heavenly Treasures, but on your turn you can also take a prey action, which is going to potentially get rid of negative effects on the board or on yourself, but also is always going to have you drawing prayer cards, which you can hold on to and utilize. But additionally, this is going to modify one of our stats. This increases our stat over here, making it a 3 instead of a 2, which means every single time we use Firebrand over here, it's going to be dealing 3 damage to each adjacent enemy instead of 1. And yes, as you continue to level up, if you find more of that particular attribute over here, look, we have Musician Songstring over here. So now we're going to have an ability, plus we've modified it, so now we're doing 4 damage to each adjacent demon every single time we activate that ability. So as you go through the game, you're adding prayer cards, you're adding Heavenly Treasures, and you're adding your own talents to the game that are all going to modify and increase how you operate. That's going to be the end of round effect. Now, one thing I missed over here, or I forgot to tell you, is going to be the drawing of darkness cards. At the beginning of each round, you're going to draw a darkness card for each player of the game. You're going to take a darkness card, you're going to put it down on this track, and then on subsequent rounds, past the first round, you're also going to draw one for each oppressed angel. So right now we go ahead and draw 3 of them instead of 2. Now, as you fill up this track, every time you draw more darkness cards, you're going to instead flip them and start activating them, which can have ongoing negative effects, which continuously hurt you. And yes, you could pray and remove those darkness cards. It's going to be one of the navigations that are utilizing your actions for you in the game, trying to heal yourself, trying to take down the demons, trying to remove the darkness cards, trying to remove various abilities and afflictions from Wither to Curse, all these negative things on your characters in the game. You're trying to balance all of these things. But then the good news is eventually at some point you're going to kill all the demons, which means the battle's not even half over yet, because the hard part is now about to begin. Once you've killed all the demons over here, and in general I didn't really go through the full setup over here, but you're going to have 1 board per angel player you're having in the game, whether you're playing this solo or not. You know, if you're playing it solo, there's you can either control 2 angels, or there is a way to have a kind of helper character in play as well. Honestly, I kind of recommend just controlling 2 angels, or honestly 3 if you want to have fun. But alternatively, if you're playing with higher player counts, you're going to have 1 angel per player, whatever it is, but you're going to be drawing a full bird per angel, having a saint per angel, all of that navigating. But once you take them all out, you're going to have the prince come out. You're going to go through the prince deck and draw a random prince. You don't know who's coming. I just set it up so you can see it, but you don't know who's coming when the prince comes. You're going to set up more boards, again equal to the number of players, repopulate those with various enemies, except one of those boards, instead of a random demon, is going to be the prince that you have to face off against. That's why you're also going to have the prince deck over here. So now we have a prince deck that's going to go over here, and you're going to be drawing cards from the prince deck, as well as the regular darkness cards, which are going to give you an additional challenge that you have to navigate as you go through this experience, because the prince cards tend to be a little harder than your standard darkness card, and sometimes you cannot even remove them from the game, providing an escalation to the game that sure, you're powering up, you're getting stronger, but so is the prince. And the prince tends to have more health than your standard demon, which means you have to figure out how much energy you're spending trying to get rid of all the demons that are in the way versus how much you want to rush and take down the prince, and do you think you can actually get ahead or not before you start to get swamped by all the things going on the board. That's the general high-level idea of what's going on in Deliverance. A lot of rules, interactions we didn't really get to, lots of small details, but the basic idea is on your turn, you're going to take 2 actions. You're going to take them from your own angel's unique actions. Pray as a shared action that everyone kind of has, but past that, your angel has unique attributes as far as how they gain courage, how they spend courage, what their stats are, and how those modify their actions, and therefore how you might want to try to boost them as you gather either their innate talents or as you gather cards from the Heavenly Treasure deck over here. Meanwhile, you're trying to navigate and move. You're trying to navigate and control the darkness cards. You're trying to be on top of the various demons, and then you're trying to make sure you do all of that with enough health left over to take down the prince. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review, starting off with ease of play. The rulebook is pretty straightforward. It's fairly condensed, fairly short altogether, which is actually a pro and a con. I would say that the rulebook aims to be very accessible and easy to go through, and that does so, but at the cost of some of the possible rules and interactions being as obvious or as clear or being able to reference. But it is easy enough to get up and running in the game. We haven't even talked about the campaign mode aspect, as far as there's going to be a little campaign book, which basically it's fairly straightforward. If you've read the rules, you just need to open this up and start going through this over here. But it gives you some small rules differences. It gives you a tutorial to get you up and started if you want to go that route. You don't need to, it's just an option. And then it gives you variable scenarios to kind of go through, where different challenges to go through. One thing I didn't talk about is the challenges over here. There's going to be all these aspects that it gives you a core idea of how you win the scenario, but it gives you additional challenge aspect. In fact, the game in general comes with a bunch of difficulty modifications so that you can dive into it at the recommended basic difficulty, but as you start to get better and get a handle on things, you can go ahead and ramp things up so that you so that you feel more satisfied as you slowly power yourself up and take the enemies down. Past that, as far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. Oh, and then as far as game length's pretty reasonable. I'd say you typically get a game in well under an hour. You could have games creep a little bit, and it does depend on player count. A typical 2-player game or solo game with 2 angels will generally come in at around the 45-minute mark. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, there's a bunch of things to get into, but starting off with the enemies and princes and the different abilities you're going to be facing off against. There are a bunch of enemies. There are a bunch of princes. They both offer a degree of asymmetry, of different powers and abilities, of things you have to face off against that are going to provide a different challenge every time. Particularly the princess, with the fact that they have their separate prince deck that you're going to have to deal with, that's going to provide a different way that they level up, they power up, they get harder and harder to deal with. But on the flip side of that, you have your angels, and your angels have powers and abilities galore, because there's the prayer deck, which I don't know if you've seen this over here, but the giant stack of prayer cards over here, an absolute ton of powers and abilities. There's the Heavenly Treasure deck with, I believe, completely unique cards, all giving you different stats and abilities to add to your deck over here. You're going to have 5 talents per angel per level, which means every angel is going to have 15 talents, of which you're going to see maximum 3 per game, which is going to take a lot of plays before you even get to see what a single angel has to offer, let alone the combination of angels, of Heavenly Treasure, of prayers, of different combinations of angels working together against the variety of enemies. There's a lot to go into here as far as the way things are going to feel differently while you try to find your own unique synergies of how your characters level up, and synergies is a big part of it. Because to begin with, before you even get to the powers and abilities, the angels have their own unique actions to drive them forward. You're going to have different ways that you're going to utilize your own actions, different ways you power up your economy of courage, that you spend those, that you're motivated to bump up certain stats, and the way different angels will complement each other or work together is going to give a degree of synergies that is also present at the table to combine with everything else I just said, that just keeps this game engaging and entertaining, as far as giving you incentives to continue playing, to try to find different ways to approach the game, to continuously tackle new scenarios because you want to see those new interactions. There's just a lot going on here. And then the fact that the game gives you a one-shot mode, which again, you have just the variety of I'm going to pop into a one-shot, I'll just go through the setup, I'll be facing off against whatever prince the game throws at me, whatever enemies the game throws at me, and then tackling the enemies with my pre-selected angels. You also have the campaign mode. The campaign mode both gives you a tutorial to go through, but it also gives you a variety of scenarios and challenges. And the challenges, to me, is one of my favorite parts of the campaign. The idea that you don't just have a individual scenario, but like I showed you already, you're going to have a way that, hey, let's go to mission 1 over here, for example. You're going to have, hey, just go ahead and fight the missions and destroy them all within 4 rounds. But then suddenly the challenge is destroy all the demons within 1 round. And that changes not just the fact that you're going to be playing the game, but some of these are going to force you to consider, well, what complement of angels actually helps me take them down. So it almost comes across as not just a scenario, but even a puzzle. And I like the fact that it just gives you all of that to think through and experience. And there's also the difficulty modification. The fact that the game starts you off with, hey, by the way, here's a game, go ahead and approach it. And it is challenging-ish. You can definitely win, but even the basic mode is not a cakewalk, and not in the slightest. You're going to have to think through your actions, try to optimize around it. Generally in the game, taking down the first round of demons I do find a little easier, but the actual full scenario, that is really a challenge. And so the game starts you off with a normal difficulty, and then you can ramp your way up from there, continuously escalating things, adding minor and major talents to the various enemies, giving them effectively just new abilities. Like, hey, by the way, you thought this is both different enough, random enough, powerful enough. Well, now suddenly you're going to have your cruel archers with their own new little ability of, whenever any demon of this type is dealt damage, divide the damage equally between each demon of this type. So you can no longer just power through and ramp someone down. They have something new preventing them from being killed, and that gives you, again, further differences, further variety to the experience, while also making sure it's consistently a challenge as you get better at the game, because you will get better at the game. But as far as things I don't like in the game, there's a few things. First of all, the first small nitpick over here is going to be the walls. You're going to have these little wall areas here, which I have found that my first game going through this, I all but ignored the walls. And it's not because they're not, well, there, you can see them, it's that they're not as obvious, at least in my opinion, on these tiles as some other games, and so I kind of knew the walls rules and then proceeded to march around the board ignoring them for most of my first game. It hasn't been an issue for me since then, which is why this is a minor nitpick. It's my own issue. I'm basically blaming the game for me not noticing, but I do think it's not necessarily as obvious, so small nitpick there. I want like 3D walls or acrylic walls to go along with these acrylic tiles over here, but I mean, I can just visually picture having a nice solid acrylic wall enhancing your gameplay experience. On a more serious critique, or something that bothers me a bit more, is I'd say that this is a typical skirmish game, and that comes along with some of the things I don't like about typical skirmish games, which is basically, in the game, you're very often just focusing on closing the gap and hitting things. You're trying to make your way toward the enemies are trying to make their way towards you, and then you both hit each other until you die. I find skirmish games often need some other objective to kind of keep the game a bit more interesting and not just focused on move towards each other and attack each other. And this game does have areas where the navigation matters. It has those elements of, oh, hit all adjacent enemies, and that's going to require you to set things up. So there are times where that movement on the board is rewarded. Or even the Saints, the fact that you're trying to be mindful of the Saints, that's going to give you something else to consider. So this is not this is no reason to have a board here. There's certainly a reason to have a board, and I do appreciate what the game is doing, and I think the game wouldn't be as good without a board, but I still wish there was more as far as objectives or reasons or ways to care more about the board presence. I tend to appreciate skirmish games the most when they're like, by the way, here's these enemies you have to kill, but also you have to think about these 3 things. You have to make your way towards the exit over there. It just gives you different reasons to care about the board and why you're there, as opposed to, I move towards you, I hit you, you move towards me, you hit me, and then we just go at it until we're both dead. So it does have that skirmish game movement and hit things aspect, which I find less rewarding. I wish there were more things, more than just the angels that you're trying to rescue, the saints that you're trying to rescue. I wish there were more elements that motivated movement to be a factor that I cared more for. I'll also say that the fact that you have the enemies spawning based on the map tile, you have a map tile and you have the enemies in the map tile, it does make it feel a bit more static as far as the game goes. I appreciate the variety of everything else. There's a ton of variety to appreciate here, but it does have that aspect of, hey, by the way, the Sandman spawned over here and the Cruel Archer spawned over here, so this is the Cruel Archer tile and that's the Sandman tile. It takes a drop away from the immersion when you feel the agents are spawning on specific tiles, as opposed to they're spawning more naturally in a hybrid atmosphere, the way you might find in more of a dungeon crawler, as opposed to the way this one sets up. Again, not as necessarily a huge nitpick, but it does take away a drop from my immersion when all the various demons you're facing off against are always spawning on their own different tiles. That just takes a drop away from it for me, that immersion aspect of the game. As far as I can see others not liking the game, first of all, the rules, like I mentioned already, they are brief, which could lead to questions. To me, overall, it gives you a much faster way to get into the game, and I don't mind house ruling some of those questions or popping to the forums and finding out whatever I need. For the most part, I have been able to get what I need from the rule book and or just assume the rule, but it is a little on that, again, brief, which is a good thing and a bad thing, so it depends what you mind. I'll also say that I said this already as well, that the initial enemies are kind of a cakewalk. Going through your first round of taking down the enemies, a lot of that's to set up some degree of posturing, of taking them down, of getting some experience points so you can level up and then actually face off against the prince, which is where the real challenge tends to lie. I've played this game a bunch of times so far, and I've yet to really feel a challenge in that first aspect. In the first rounds of the initial spawn, the demons, take them all out, move to the final battle, I've yet to really feel a challenge in those first rounds. Again, to be fair, there are difficulty modifications you can certainly put in play. I think the balance in mind that I found is, as I've added some of them, I still don't find the initial ones easy, the initial ones hard, but I do find the prince hard. So for me, I find that like the prince is more of a challenge, and as you add the modifications, it does balance it out well. But I still find that ratio, it's a cakewalk, take them out, kill them all, and then the prince, who's gonna, depending on what level of difficulty you're at, the prince may kill you in the game. In any case, as far as final thoughts on Deliverance, I overall really enjoy Deliverance. There are a lot of things about this game. First of all, powers and abilities galore. If you've watched my channel over the years, you know I appreciate powers and abilities, and the fact that this game gives you a ton of ways to start off with asymmetric angels, but then further ramp up their asymmetry, further give them heavenly treasures from so you have a giant stack of heavenly treasures from a shared deck, you have their own individual talents from their individual decks, but it gives you a ton of ways to build out a team that's going to take things out, and a ton of reasons to continuously replay play it so you can test different combinations, try new angels, and just try new talents. Again, you can play this game a dozen times and still not to see all that a single angel has to offer, let alone the whole host of angels at your disposal. And so this game has a ton of things that I love. There's a lot of elements of this game that are 4.5 out of 5 for me, but it does have that skirmish aspect, and the fact that it doesn't, I guess, handle the skirmish aspects in ways that some games have for me to kind of minimize how it just feels like move together and hit things. So overall for me, I'm ending up right now on a 4 out of 5 on Deliverance. There are a lot of things that are really enjoyable. If you like powers and abilities, this game will deliver. If you like a game that's going to give you a solid skirmish mode that gives you one-shot and campaign modes to go through, this game has a lot to offer to keep you engaged along the way. For me, a solid 4 out of 5. Some elements hold it back, again, to most notably that move towards each other and hit things. I wish the game were a drop more interesting as far as the ways the battlefield evolved and changed, but the rest of it is absolutely top notch. 4 out of 5 on Deliverance. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you're looking for another game that to me felt similar in, well, a lot of ways in terms of the enemies and minions that are easier to take down, the navigation around the map, the move closer and hit things, the way you're going to ramp up and power up your characters. Unmatched Tales to Amaze for me had a similar arc or feel as I played through them. Both of them are ultimately skirmish games that are going to have you facing off against minions and eventually a big bad boss as you take them out. Lots of differences between them, but I got similar vibes from them. And then as well as Cthulhu Death May Die. This game has an arc where you are powering up and leveling up your characters as you go through the experience, and then that final boss is going to be a challenge to get over, and they are often powering up as you go as well. So if you like that power ramp, that arc, that one's more of a dungeon crawler, one's more of a skirmish game, but they do have a lot of similar feels as far as powers and abilities, taking things down, and a lot of the, well, general elements of the game. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.